All right, so let's go ahead and graph some sine and cosine equations. We're first going to look at this first one being 3 sine of 2 times x minus pi over 4 minus 1. And we're going to first look at our amplitude. Our amplitude is going to be our first number that's being multiplied by our sine or our cosine. In this case, it's 3. So amplitude is 3. That means we're going from our midline either up 3 or down 3. The second thing we're going to look at is our period, and our period isn't explicitly told to us, but we do get our b value right here, which is 2. And now our equation to determine our period is going to be 2 pi over b equals our period. So in this case, we have 2 pi over 2. So that means our period is going to be equal to pi. So that means it's going to take pi to complete one cycle. The next thing is our phase shift. That is going to be this minus pi over 4. This works just like horizontal shifts. So if it's a minus 4, that means I'm going to be going to the right. So that means I'm going to be going to the right by pi over 4. And then my vertical shift works like my vertical shifts in quadratics, like in cubics, like in all other functions we've done so far this year. This means minus 1, I am going to be going down 1. Our vertical shift is going to be the same thing as our midline. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my midline here at negative 1. So y equals negative 1. That will be my midline. Now we have a sine function here that's given to us. And if we can remember, sine goes from the middle to the high point, and then we go back down to the middle, to the low, back to the middle. So we're going to start at the middle. The middle is going to be our midline. It's going to be at negative 1. And that's going to be at our phase shift where we start at pi over 4, which is right here. Now we have to determine what increments we're increasing by. If we remember, a period is how long it takes for us to go around a circle, and we can split that into 4 different segments. And to get that, I'm going to take my period and divide it by 4. So I will take pi, divide that by 4, that's pi over 4. So we're going to be going on by increments of pi over 4. So again, I'm starting at pi over 4. Pi over 4 plus pi over 4 would give me 2 pi over 4, or pi over 2. Then I will have 3 pi over 4. Then I'll have 4 pi over 4, which is just pi. And then I'll have 5 pi over 4. So if I'm starting at my midline, which is negative 1, my next point, I'm going to go from my middle to my high point. So I'm going to add 3 to negative 1. That will give me 2. I'll go back to my middle, which is negative 1. I'm going to go to my low point, which is 3 less than negative 1. So that means negative 4. And I'll go back to my middle, which is negative 1. So when I plot these points, I'll have 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and then finish up right here. So what I've graphed here is just one cycle of my sine function. For our questions, you're really just going to have to graph one cycle, but it's good to continue to cycle just to see what the graph would look like. So just continuing my pattern I had. On the right, it would look like this. And then on the left, it would look like this. And I'm not even going to finish it out all the way. I'm just going to keep sketching it a little bit more. Okay? So that would be our graph given that equation. And again, that is for a sine. Next, we're going to do the same process, but this time it's going to be a cosine. So on my cosine, I have y equals cosine of 3 times x plus pi plus 2. I have no number being multiplied by my cosine here at the front, so that means my amplitude is just going to be 1. My period here, I'm going to find that by looking at 3. 3 is going to be my b, so I'll have 2 pi over 3, and that is going to be my period then. 2 pi over 3. my phase shift is this plus pi. So if it's plus pi, that means I'm going to be going to the left pi. And my vertical shift has a plus 2, so I'm going to be going up 2, which means, again, my midline is going to be at plus 2. Or not plus 2, at y equals 2. So, again, let's do our phase shift as well. I went to the left pi, so that means I'm going to start at negative pi, and my amplitude is 1. And again, cosine, unlike sine, cosine starts at the high point, then goes to our midline, then to my low, then to my middle, then back to my high point. So, if I'm starting at negative pi, and it's starting at my high point, my highest point here is going to be 1 above my midline, which is going to be at 3. Now let's go ahead and figure out what my other increments are going to be. So again, I'm going to take my period, which is 2 pi over 3, and divide that by 4. That's the same thing as 2 pi over 3 times 1/4, times 1/4, which is the same thing as 2 pi over 12, which is pi over 6. So I'm going to be moving in increments of pi over 6 because, again, my circle can be split up into 4 different sections in the full rotation. So if I start at negative pi, we said that's going to be 1. Then after that, I'll have negative 5 pi over 6, negative 4 pi over 6, which is negative 2 pi over 3. Then I'll have negative 3 pi over 6, which is negative pi over 2. And then for the last one after that, I'll have negative 2 pi over 6, or negative pi over 3. So I go from my high to my middle. I also made a mistake here. It's graphed correctly at the point 3 because I went up 1, but at negative pi, it's going to be at 3 because that's 3 plus my midline, which is 1 plus my midline, which is 3. Then after that, I'm going to go to my midline, so it's going to go to 2. Then it's going to go to my lowest point, so 2 minus 1 is 1. Back up to my midline, which is 2. And then back up to my high point, which is 3. So I'll go from 3 to 2 to 1 to 2 to 3. And again, even though we only are required mostly to graph one cycle, I'm just going to continue to cycle in the pattern here just so we can see a more fleshed out graph. So it should look something roughly like this. Now my graph's a little bit straight here. It should be a little bit more curved, but as long as you get a general idea, I think we'll be okay on our graph here. When you graph on your own, yes, it should be a little bit more straight. I'm just kind of going through things quickly because I don't want to keep dragging on this video. We're already about 8.5 minutes in. All right, so let's wrap this up with one more question here. We have y equals 3 cosine of 2 times x plus pi over 2. So let's start with our amplitude. Our amplitude for this one is going to be 3. That's my 3 out front. Next is my period. My b is equal to 2, so 2 pi over 2, that's equal to pi. My period is going to be pi. My phase shift, I have a plus pi over 2, so that means if it's a plus, I'm going to the left. I am going to the left pi over 2. And in my vertical shift, I have nothing being added or subtracted at the end, so there is none, which means my midline is going to remain at y equals 0. All right, so this one again is a cosine. So if it's cosine, that means cosine starts at my high point and then goes to my midline. So if I have a phase shift left to negative pi over 2, I'll be starting here, and my amplitude is 3, so my high point for this one will be at 3. So again, I'm going to start at negative pi over 2. Next, my period, I'm going to divide that by 4, so pi over 4. I'm going to be going in increments of pi over 4. So that means After negative pi over 2, I'll have negative pi over 4. I'll have 0. Then I'll have pi over 4. Then I will have pi over 2. And then we can go follow our pattern after that. So we said we start at 3. Then we go back to our midline, which is going to be at 0. Then we go 3 below our midline, which is going to be negative 3. Back to our midline at 0. And then back up to our high point at 3. So 3, 0, negative 3, 0, and about back up to 3. Again, let's go ahead and fill out a little bit more of this graph so we can see exactly what it's going to look like in more of a full scope. And here is what this one should look like. Again, do our phase shift, negative pi over 2, start at our high point, amplitude of 3, period of pi, so we're going by increments of pi over 4.